Our chalice lighting this morning comes from Rilke. Take your practiced powers and stretch them out until they span the chasm between two contradictions. For the God wants to know itself within you.
Good morning, River Road. My name is Kirsten Lodel, and I'm honored to be serving as your intern minister this year. The theme this month at River Road is cultivating relationship, and we are so glad to be in relationship with you here in the sanctuary this morning, and to all of you on our YouTube live stream, thank you for being with us today. We hope that if you are new to River Road, or if you are feeling new because you are just starting to reconnect as we bit by bit come out of this pandemic time, that you will reach out to our wonderful connections team at connections@rruuc.org so that we may properly welcome you and plug you into our very, very active congregational life. If you are new today or haven't been in the last few weeks, and you came into the lounge to get your name tag, you might have noticed a table set up as an altar in the lounge with some candles on it. You might have seen that there is some organic material, acorns, cattails, even what might be a turn-of-the-century barrel hoop sitting on the table. Those are all findings from our very grounds right here. As you may know, we have been working hard over these last many months and will be continuing to work hard to come to more deeply understand the history of our land right here at River Road, all of the people and bodies and stories contained in the history of this land. And this altar is one of the things that we have established so that everyone here in the congregation has an opportunity to interact with their views on this land, their relationship to it, and to create something that has meaning for you. So feel free after the service, if you would like, to light a candle. Feel free to add your own contributions, and this will continue to evolve over time. As we now move into our opening hymn, which is We Shall Be Known, performed by the Thrive East Bay Choir, if you pay close attention, you might notice a very special performer in the choir. Come, let us worship together.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now, it is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Good morning. My name is Beth Irakura, and I serve as your Director of Religious Education. Another one of my roles here at River Road is to coordinate and lead the UU Wellspring program. UU Wellspring is a spiritual deepening program that participants come to from our congregation, and actually from a couple others too. They commit to a daily spiritual practice while they're in the program, and they usually want to continue with that. And then they meet twice a month to reflect on some different spiritual topics. The first year, we reflect on the sources of Unitarian Universalism, and then in subsequent years, we offer programs on the principles, on the arts, on spiritual practice, and on social justice, and the spirituality of all of those things. When we reflect, we're not having a discussion. We're simply all speaking from our hearts and laying them down, those reflections down side by side. And in doing so, in not cross-talking and not challenging each other, but just coming from our hearts, it leads to really deep spiritual connections and spiritual deepening. So I asked some of our more experienced Wellspring participants the question, how did your participation in Wellspring deepen your spirituality and deepen your sense of belonging? And we'll have some people talking to you.
Hello, my name is Lisa Rubenstein. When I joined my first Wellspring class, I'd never thought of myself as a spiritual person. I'd grown up in a Jewish household, but we weren't observant. In the 1960s, my family had rebelled against their religious relatives, and they prioritized independence from organized religion and institutions. When I became an adult and moved to Washington, D.C., I tried a variety of humanist congregations, but I didn't feel like I belonged to any of them. I joined River Road to gain a sense of community and to do some social justice work. I participated in some women's groups and I did social justice activities, but I still didn't feel a part of the congregation. I enrolled in the basic Wellspring class as a bridge between my full-time work and my retirement. In the Wellspring course, I learned to listen very deeply to the other people in my group. I had the unique opportunity to be heard when I spoke without judgment or any feedback at all from the others in the group. We held the space for each other, which gave us the opportunity to freely explore our individual thoughts and our group thoughts around spirituality. We developed a strong sense of trust and very deep relationships. For the first time, I felt a part of the River Road community. In my second Wellspring class called Deep Questions, we examined the Unitarian Universalist principles and how they could be applied. The gift that I received from that class was to see the connection between social justice and spirituality. This new framing enabled me to feel a strong bond with others in the congregation committed to social change. Now, as a member of the River Road Board, I know that the work we're doing, especially the visioning work in which we consider a powerful future for our congregation, that work is truly spiritual. And because of this, it gives me a strong sense of belonging to the River Road community. Thank you.
Hello, I've been through several Wellspring courses and I've loved every one of them. I've done sources and spiritual practices and now sacred arts. And I'm now facilitating a sources group for another congregation. For me, recalling all the sources of Unitarian Universalism has reaffirmed for me that this is my chosen faith. Through Wellspring, I was able to name nature as my true source of spirituality. Mother Nature is my God. I belong in the garden. In the Wellspring program, I chose continually to use the metaphor for repotting a plant as I examined how I fit into this world. I removed all the soil from the plant. I trimmed the roots and then gave them a jump start with some new soil. And I put the plant back into the pot to enrich and spur its new growth and the new life energy. This energy makes me stronger. I'm more aware and revealing among my friends. I'm a better listener. I read and visit and revisit my entire development of a spiritual life. I treasure the grounding that comes from my spirit. I continue and blossom and belong where I am planted. Thank you.
One of the best things about the Wellspring program is that it goes deep. It doesn't matter whether it's the source material, and so you'll get deep into, the foundations of UUism. You'll get into really deep questions that make you think a lot about who you are and how you live your life. But also you get into really deep relationships with people because Wellspring creates an environment where you can be completely vulnerable because it's a really safe space. That vulnerability allows you to get really deep and to share stories that probably not a lot of people know about you. And when you hear others being vulnerable and you yourself are vulnerable, you connect in a way that is just different. And so, I look at the relationships that I've made during Wellspring, and there are people who get me and I get them on an incredibly deep level. And so it has definitely impacted my sense of belonging.
As we do the deep work in our inner lives, we know that this allows for us to deeply show up in this community together. There's so many joys and concerns that we bring into our lives, into this community, and into this space this morning. Together, we mourn the passing of Jean Loring, who lived and worked among our community for decades. Her life is celebrated and remembered by her son, Rob, her many friends, and this place that she called her own. We also celebrate alongside Peter and Betty Wilson and the birth of their grandson, Jack. The baby and the parents are doing really well, happy and healthy in Nashville this week. And we're also grateful for our River Road community, and especially our immigration and refugee task force, with only short notice leaders, including Lori Sales and Charlotte Jones Carroll, marshaled all of our generosity to set up a warm and welcoming home for a family of 7 refugees from Afghanistan. They're settling in very well as we speak, even while we prepare for yet another family in the coming weeks. As a community, we made this happen together. As a community, we continue to serve however we can. Of course, here we are gathered on the sacred lands of the Piscataway Conoy tribe, a place of history and community to the Coachtuck people. Here we have gathered on land that once stolen, over the years later fed the financial machine of enslavement, over which the steps of those who have yearned for freedom have so often trod. Here we are gathered in a place where heartbreak and history and hope meet. Here we are gathered. May we have the courage to hold it all together.
As we hold our joys and our concerns within this community in our hearts, as we are filled with the beautiful music that has started our service, the contributions of Shuai, of Reverend Amanda singing, and the beautiful voices of our congregants sharing about their Wellspring experience, I now invite you into a time of prayer and of meditation. Today, we reflect on the idea of our relationship to a spirit that is larger than ourselves. We reflect on the ideas of belonging, on the ideas of brokenness, and of wholeness. I invite you to assume whatever posture, hand position, eye position, open or closed, that feels most grounded and prayerful for you. After our reading, we will hold a few moments of silent meditation. Our reading comes from Reverend Teresa Soto, Senior Minister of First Unitarian Church of Oakland, and it is called Bring Your Broken Hallelujah Here. Please join me in prayer. Bring your broken hallelujah here. Bring the large one that is beyond repair. Bring the small one that is too soft to share. Bring your broken hallelujah here. I know that people have told you that before you can give, you have to get yourself together. They overstated the value of perfection by a lot. Or they forgot. You are the gift. We all bring some broken things, songs and dreams and long-lost hopes. But here and together, we reach within. As a community, we begin again. And from the pieces, we build something new. There is work that only you can do. We wait for you.
Each month at River Road, we extend our offering to a community organization whose mission and values align with our own. For this month of October, that is Partner Church. Many of you in this congregation are all too familiar with Partner Church and the work that we do together to create the beloved community. But to share more about Partner Church, I want to invite up to speak Pat Wand.
Our congregation is guided by the 8 Unitarian Universalist principles, and 2 of those principles, the 6th and the 8th, are directly related to our partner church. The 6th principle simply reads, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice. The 8th principle is a recent development in our congregation and focuses on our commitment to dismantle racism and address white privilege as they manifest themselves in ourselves and in the institutions. One step I, as a white person, am taking toward dismantling racism and addressing white privilege is to become an active ally with those who have less power, social, economic, political, than I do. As a congregation, we initiated a global commitment nearly 30 years ago in 1992 when we founded our partner church committee by forming an alliance, a partnership with Fiatfalva, Transylvania, in the country of Romania. In 2007, we extended that partnership to Mont Blanc, a deeply impoverished and isolated community in northeast India. This month, our theme is cultivating relationships, and what better way to do that than to reach around the world to our Unitarian communities. As we extend our offering today, I invite you to think about the villagers in Mont Blanc and in Transylvania. Each community extends and reflects its distinct cultural-based religious practices, very different than ours. But we all hold the principles of Unitarianism, respect for human dignity and the environment that cradles us. Our principal financial focus is to expand educational opportunities in those communities and in the broader communities in which they both thrive. In Fiatfalva, we support some capital improvements. We support educational opportunities for the congregation, and we support a unique after-school program for economically and culturally disadvantaged children, primarily the Roma children. In Mont Blanc, your donations support critical basic infrastructure capital projects and pay the salaries of 3 of the 6 teachers in the village school, which in essence serves as the only public school in the area. Thus, our financial gifts there support both education and salaries in a basically cashless community. We thank you, River Roaders, who have supported this effort for nearly 30 years, and a special thank you also to those of you who have already contributed this year. Our short video today gives you a quick glimpse of our partners, seeing real people speaking within their own communities helps us understand the social and economic conditions in which they live. They tell us, in their own words, of their sincere gratitude for our financial gifts, but more importantly, for our friendship. These partners over the years in both communities repeatedly tell us of the courage that our friendship gives to them. Here are some video greetings from our partners around the world.
Dear friends, today we celebrated Thanksgiving, and after the church service we had a lunch together with the church members, and at this occasion we are thinking of you, and we send our greetings to the Partner Fest, and we hope that we will have in the future, in the coming years, possibilities to meet again in person. It was great to see a few members of the Partner Church Committee yesterday during the Zoom meeting, and I am glad that you care for us, and you send your greetings for to our holiday occasion.
Kedves amerikai testvéreink, Burszán Erika vagyok, szeretettel üdvözöllek Fiatfalváról. Tartalmas őszt kívánok, bőségeset, és a legfontosabb, hogy egészségeset. Minden jót!
Hello, dear friends in River Road. I wish you blessed Partnerfest from Fiatfalva.
Üdvözöljük az amerikai testvérgyülekezetet.
Szeretettel köszöntelek.
Üdvözletünket küldjük Fiatfalváról, a Fodor család.
Szeretettel köszöntök mindenkit a Partnerfest alkalmával, és mindenkinek kívánok erőt, egészséget, és minden jót.
Szeretettel köszöntjük!
We are so grateful to each and every one of you, my dear friends. This anniversary reminding us a church of beyond belief, a church that focuses salvation through deeds, and God is love. And God is love. Love is the doctrine of this church. So let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and know God. Thank you so much for your greatest contribution to our church. You are the wind beneath our wing. With love and friendship, thank you. With love from Mount Church. Thank you.
So beautiful. Thank you, Pat. Thank you to all of the stewards in this community of our partner church program and relationships. Thank you to our partner churches, if you are watching out there. This is a relationship of mutuality and interdependence, which also speaks to our seventh principle. As we move into our time of offering and our offertory music, I hope that you will consider donating today in honor of our partner church program. Now that we have, in our COVID times, moved beyond the passing of the basket, you have permission to pull out your phones just now and to text to give. The number is 73256. You enter then RRUUC and the amount for those at home that should be scrolling across your screens. You may also go to our website, visit our social justice page, and then you can select Partner Church for your dedicated offering today. And while you're there, I'd suggest that you spend a little bit of time looking at all the rich social justice offerings in this community, and also all the great work that Reverend Amanda and Natalie on our communications team have been doing to update our website so that we may share fully all of the work that we are doing here. We are grateful for the generosity of this community in all its many ways, time, treasure, talents. And we now invite you into a time of giving and offering.
From Adrienne Marie Brown. You are a miracle walking. I greet you with wonder in a world which seeks to own your joy and your imagination. You have chosen to be free every day as a practice. I can never know the struggles you went through to get here, but I know you have swum upstream, and at times it has been lonely. I want you to know I honor the choices you made in solitude. And I honor the work you have done to belong. I honor your commitment to that which is larger than yourself and your journey to love the particular container of life that is you. You are enough. Your work is enough. You are needed. Your work is sacred. You are here, and I am grateful. There's this idea that tends to permeate our notion of spirituality, that we have to do something outside of ourselves to somehow become more of our spiritual or enlightened selves. That enlightenment is just beyond the horizon, and to get there it takes discipline and practice and determination. And of course, this plays on our cultural notions of work ethic and perfectionism, but more so, even deeper, our separation and our dividedness from ourselves. This month in worship and family ministry, we've been exploring the theme of cultivating relationship. And what we've really been exploring in that is the space in between. The space between you and me, the space between community and the wider world around us, the space between justice and injustice. So when we explore spirituality, perhaps we could view it as the space in between the inner and the outer world. What does it mean to cultivate that relationship with self? When I bring up the dividedness within ourselves, on the other side of that coin is the concept of living an undivided life. Of course, this notion of an undivided life can be found throughout many cultures and practices, many spiritual and religious traditions. But today I want to lift up the spiritual teacher of Parker Palmer. Many of you who have taken Wellspring, which we learned about earlier today, have probably read his foundational text, A Hidden Wholeness. Of the divided life, he writes, afraid that our inner light will be extinguished or that our inner darkness exposed, we hide our true identities from each other. In the process, we become separated from our own souls. We end up living divided lives, so far removed from the truth we hold within that we cannot know the integrity that comes from being what you are. I've spoken many times in this space about my religious upbringing as a Southern Baptist. And I've usually used that as an illustration of how far my spiritual journey has taken me. But there's another angle to my origin story, which actually really isn't all that surprising. That I grew up feeling incredibly divided. At some point in the early transition from childhood to adolescence, I began to sense somehow that all of me was not welcome in this world. And of course that happens to most of us, usually because of some sort of social conditioning, and often we get this message that we are not quite enough, and often we internalize that message. But what I often forget to mention about my early spiritual upbringing is that I actually loved going to church. After a certain age, nobody was forcing me to be there. I enjoyed the activities. I enjoyed the youth group. I had friends. I sang in the choir. I learned about volunteering and community service. I had a whole life within my faith community. It just happened to be very different from my life outside of my faith community. And all of that seemed at odds with what was inside of me. I was disconnected from my own spiritual life, and it seemed that there was nothing that I could really do to bridge that divide. Now, Parker Palmer would call that divide the tragic gap, that space between what is and what could be. And it seems that we're constantly living in this space or moving through that very tension. We experience the tragic gap in our organizations, in our communities, even in the world around us, where we're holding what it is to be longing for what could be. And I would go out on a limb to further say that living the divided life is to constantly try to escape that tension of the tragic gap by any means necessary. But to live into wholeness is to allow that tension to inform how we show up in this world. And further, that spiritual practice is a tool in which to bridge the gap by making space for all of the parts of ourselves, including that tension. When I reflect on my early spiritual and religious experience, what I have often failed to recognize for so many years following it is that although I did have to put certain parts of myself away, I was still showing up with everything that I had. The only part of that story that I was paying attention to for all these years was the shame and the guilt I experienced for not living up to the high moralized standards of the evangelical cultural community. And yes, that is a truth, but that is only a part of the truth when I approach it from a lens of wholeness. When I approach it from a lens of wholeness, I see that regardless of how I was showing up, I was showing up. That all the divided parts of me that I was bringing with me were longing for expression and yearning to belong. And we all have those fragmented pieces of ourselves. We all have those pieces of brokenness. And in all of these identities that we fill up our lives with, fill up our inner spaces with, our identities around who we love, how we move through this world, our responsibilities, our stories of triumph and failure, those instances when we know we could have done better, and the times when we give it our all of those identities can hold that tension, that kind of elbowing for space within us, that conflict between our inner and our outer realities. But if we're approaching the idea of relationship being the space between, and we're looking at our spirit as the space between our inner and outer self, then the focus shifts from how somehow to merge our identities, merge who we are, or become some abstract, better version of ourselves that doesn't struggle, but to expand our spirits and make room for all that we bring to the table. And this isn't only for our inner and outer personal world, but also for the work that we do in the larger world, in our communities, in our organizations, the work that we do in this space to bring about the beloved community. And in that, the importance of environment absolutely cannot be ignored. When I talk about my early religious environment, it's that the space wasn't actually there to expand who I was, to hold all that I was becoming. So if we look at the space between ourselves, whether we are whole or divided or not, and our communities, we see how important it is for our environments to be able to expand as well. Now, we've all heard a lot of discourse over the last decade or so about this concept of safe spaces. Of course, some folks feel like people are way too coddled these days, and some people feel the need to protect one another from the harms that so many of us have experienced, and there's all kinds of opinions in between that. But beyond all of that, the very concept of safe spaces asks us some central questions. How responsible do we need to be for one another? And also, who is accountable to who? Or as Chidi from The Good Place would summarize it, what do we owe each other? What kind of spaces do we owe each other? I turn to the work that's happening in spaces of radical change and movement all around us. Spaces often led by BIPOC organizers, healers, activists, artists, and movement makers in general. Of course, BIPOC standing for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. These spaces often center queer, trans, and non-binary voices and experiences. And these spaces are facing some of the most pressing matters of our time through the radical and subversive lens of wholeness and hope, of radical acceptance and love. And rather than striving to create safe spaces in which to do this work, many of these movements are shifting to creating brave space. In the book Holding Change, BIPOC queer author, activist, and healer Adrienne Marie Brown, who I read from earlier, she explores the ways that we can facilitate change within our movements and our communities through radical practices. And of course, in her brilliant style, she pulls together some of the most innovative thinkers of our day to help lead us all through this work. One such thinker is Mickey Scott Bay Jones, who shares this invitation to brave space. Together, we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in a real world, we carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Our spaces can be just as divided as we are. In fact, the division is often more palpable and even more disheartening in our spaces. We expect a lot of the places that we frequent, and it can be a massive disappointment when our spaces do not live up to our expectations. And the closer that the space is to our hearts, the easier it is for us to be let down. I think specifically of faith communities, where we have mission and vision and shared values and principles, but where also we are human and messy and fragile and complicated, and where it can seem like who we are and who we want to be is quite not matching up. Palmer shares with us that wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing brokenness as an integral part of life. Embracing brokenness, and that is brave. When we can come into a space and embrace brokenness, then we are making space for all that we are, for us to gather in spaces and forget our perfect offering. To expand the space between us and our community is really to expand the space between ourselves and one another. That is the heart of relationship. To gather together in faith community, whether near or far, virtual or in person, is to choose to be held in this space, to actively add our energy together, to create something that holds us all, and that is powerful, and that is brave, and that is why we are here. Because we are vulnerable, because we are real. There is no guarantee to the outcome of what we are ever trying to do. There is nothing that we can guarantee about what we can produce, but we show up, we make space, we hold space, and we invite the Spirit to move through. And I do believe that we owe that to one another in this world. Like the reading said, we have a right to start somewhere and continue to grow. But there is a word of caution. May we not make wholeness our next quest or goal or our next frontier, because to do so sets us on the same path of perfectionism and comparison, whether it's in our own lives or in our communal lives. May we approach it with a lens of wholeness. And that lens of wholeness is actually a lens of grace. We might be living divided lives. When I think of that little girl I was, when I think of that teenager I was in a community that I didn't feel like was for me, I think of the fact that I was showing up on purpose. That there was a part of me that yearned for that community and that yearned for belonging, and that little girl in me deserves the respect to understand that she was whole, even as I was divided. That lens of grace works when we are looking back or when we are looking forward or looking side to side. Yes, our spaces. Yes, our communities. We might be imperfect and we will always be under construction, but also, yes, we are brave because we keep showing up. We show up with our brokenness and we do make space to hold it all. So may we be expansive. May we be radical and brave and broken. And may we find the hidden wholeness within it all. May it be so. Blessed be. As Reverend Nancy says each week, what we do together in community is a reflection of who we want to be as a community in this world. So just a few announcements this morning before we close out. Today at 4 p.m., CCNC is being joined by 5 other UU congregations to hold a UN Day forum specifically on taking action for climate change. This is a great opportunity not only to learn from one another, to discuss and to figure things out together, but also to be in community with those that share our faith. That is at 4 o'clock, and if you don't have the link, check the email, check the e-weekly. Also, our fall auction is coming up. We'll be taking items for donation through November 13th. Those items can be a cake, a pie, cookies, cleaning services, whatever you would like to donate to fundraise for this community. Save that date for the evening of November 13th. We'll wrap it all up in our live online auction. This is such an important event for our community. And of course, next week is Halloween Sunday. We'll have a very fun outdoor haunted house hosted by our middle schoolers and a costume parade at the end of the 10 o'clock service. So come ready for something spooktacular. That was Nancy. She wrote that, not me. Of course, if you'd like to connect further in our small groups, there's open enrollment for another week or so. You can email me directly. You can also find our interest form online under our adult small groups page. Of course, being together, spiritually deepening and connecting is what it is truly all about. So now as we close out, I want to invite you to open up your hands, extending your hands out to let the energy in, feeling what we've created in this space. I want to close this out with a wise saying that two ascetics were walking up to the mountain to meditate and pray, and they yelled out, "Hey, bud, come join us." To which their friend replied, "Nah, I must stay here." You're welcome. As we move into our lives, may we stay centered right here where we are. May we stay centered in our hearts. May we stay centered, anchored to one another. May it be so. Blessed be. Go now in peace.